Before we get into today's video, be sure to drop a like, subscribe, turn on those post notifications so you never miss an episode of the Mets Weekly Podcast that will be recorded live at 6 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays in the off season. Be sure to follow us on TikTok and on Twitter for extra content. Be sure to follow all three individual co-hosts. Those links are down in the description down below. With all that being said, let's begin. As we continue to discuss the internal decisions that David Stearns has to make this offseason regarding the 2026 New York Mets, as we discussed in a past video, 7 guys most likely not to return, it's only right we continue throwing another player into the trade machine, Jeff McNeil. Jeff McNeil, the two-time All-Star, former representative of Team USA in the WBC, has had a very mixed career as a New York Met, coming up as a non-prospect, but ever since he signed that contract after the batting title, his tenure as a Met has gone downhill. You've seen a couple of down years. This past year in 2025, we saw sort of a bounce back to what he is, and we've seen him change his archetype of I just want to hit for batting average. Now I'm going to go some year, so half the season, I want to hit for the high batting average. One half of the season, he wants to hit for power in his 2019 season. He's a multifaceted player. You've seen him play second base. We've seen him play third. We've seen him play the outfield. He was a productive center fielder for 2025 Mets. That also showed that he was the best option. Just showed how bad the options otherwise were for this 2025 Mets to play center field. But Jeff needs to be at least explored, and we're seeing now the final year guaranteed of that extension he signed under Billy Epler, with only fully 1 year left, guaranteed at about $15.75 million left with the club option for 2027, meaning so any team that has to acquire or goes to try to acquire Jeff McNeil, it's really only 1 year guaranteed. And if he has a good season, you can pick it up and have, a versatile piece. With the breakout of Brett Beatty, as small as it may be, makes Jeff McNeil expendable where Brett can play second, can play third. Like I've said, I do believe he could potentially play a corner outfield if you need be. Why would you pay a guy like Jeff McNeil $15 million when you have a guy in Brett Beatty who can do what he does at $14 million less, and the Mets are looking to be very active in free agency, and this is a contract that you, even if you have to pay down a little bit, every dollar you can potentially shave off the luxury tax bill is a very good option. We've seen as well Jet Williams is coming. You see some guys in the minor leagues. You want to give opportunities if you believe still in Ronnie Mauricio or Luis Angel Acuna, and you want to give those guys opportunity. Jeff McNeil is just holding those guys down from playing time. There are better options externally, and again, if you want to let the kids play, Jeff McNeil has to go. I also want to preface that most likely a trade for Jeff McNeil is going to be a pure salary dump. So I wouldn't be surprised if the actual trade that David Stearns makes is for a couple low-end, no-name prospects just to clear up some money. So I do expect that to be maybe in these trades, the 3 teams and 3 packages I've come up with. I do have the Mets sending some cash just like they did with Kodai Senga. So let's start breaking them down. And let's start with our first trade, and that is with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. And Artie Moreno, you can already believe, love to have a former batting champion play second base for his team and add that to his marquee, saying, hey, this is a multiple-time All-Star and batting champ. And the Angels could use a second baseman. Christian Moore is most likely not going to have everyday reps or ready for everyday reps at second base. If you put a guy like McNeil that could split time, potentially a platoon, then if Christian Moore breaks out, you could move Jeff McNeil to the outfield with a potential trade of finally Taylor Ward or Joe Adell. Let's say they move them this offseason. McNeil potentially could shift to the corner outfield and fill that versatility for the Angels. The New York Mets would trade Jeff McNeil plus $5 million to the Los Angeles Angels for right-handed reliever Robert Stevenson. Stevenson signed a 3-year, $33 million contract with the Los Angeles Angels a couple off seasons ago. He did not pitch at all in the 2024 season. In 2025, he got back at the end of the season, pitching in 12 games, an ERA of 2.70. Throws a cutter 70% of the time, around 87 miles an hour. He has a four-seam fastball as well, sitting around 96. He throws it about 16% of the time. He's got a split finger. He throws 8% of the time, around 88 miles an hour. And as a slider, he also throws about 7% of the time, around 86 miles an hour. Look at the contract, $5 million, making McNeil around 10 and change. Robert Stevenson is set to make $11 million next year on his contract, as well as Jeff McNeil has a 2027 player option. Because of the injury, it is only going to be for $2.5 million club option, extra insurance for another year. If Stevenson were to come back and produce in the bullpen, you have a guy making $2.5 million club option you could pick up for next year's bullpen. He was a former top prospect with the Cincinnati Reds, floundered around the big leagues, but like most pitchers who flounder around the big leagues, they find their way to Tampa Bay, and he had a really big breakout in his walk year, leading to getting that big contract. We threw over 77 innings, 3.10 ERA, 52 and a third innings pitch, and yet 77 strikeouts. Again, this is an interesting mix and an interesting pitcher. We've seen the Mets love their splits and sinkers, as similar as what Stern's been bringing over some of his guys. I still expect them to be heavy with the sinkers and splitters. So you add that. And again, you add a guy like Robert Stevenson. I'm not saying he has to be a full back end of the bullpen guy, but like we've talked about, the bullpen right now is three guys. You need some of these middle relief guys. You had him with Minter, Brazipan, and Rayleigh as of right now. Obviously, you hope Edwin Diaz is back, but then you have to rebuild this bullpen, and not just with the high-end guys. You need middle of the bullpen guys, that was kind of the death of the Mets last season, where you had Diaz and you had, Brooks Raley, but everybody else besides that struggled, and you didn't really have a guy you could use earlier in the games to get big outs that you trusted. Robert Stevenson can easily swing into that role. Even if he's bad, you cut it and boom, and he's gone after this year. So it's, again, kind of that easy swap of money where you get about a $10, $11 million second baseman. You're trading for a $10, $11 million reliever. Both teams get what they desperately need. And Artie Moreno, again, can say, at least in the Angels' perspective, hey, I'm adding an all-star. I'm adding, a batting champion. And you know how Artie Moreno is. He could be a perfect destination for, prop up Jeff McNeil hitting in front of Mike Trout in the Angels lineup. And again, the Mets get some much needed bullpen help. Moving on to trade number 2 and moving on to dysfunctional organization number 2, you're seeing a trend here. And let's call up the brand new president of baseball operations of the Colorado Rockies, Paul DiPodestro. And they are the dumpster fire organizations of dumpster fire organizations. They have a couple of decent pieces, like, again, Ezekiel Tovar, Hunter Goodman had a very good year. Brenton Doyle's in center field. But everywhere else, you can add a big leaguer, and they're in desperate need of talent. And Jeff McNeil could fit perfectly second base. Ever since Brendan Rodgers left, they have been looking for a second base. The New York Mets send Jeff McNeil as well as $10 million and right-handed reliever Jonathan Pitaro, just open up 40-man roster spots. And the Mets would acquire right-handed reliever Jimmy Herget and the 11th overall prospect in the Colorado Rockies system, Zach Veen. Talk about Jimmy Herget, the 32-year-old right-handed reliever, coming off a pretty solid season this past year with the Colorado Rockies in 59 games through 83 and a third innings pitched, 2.48 ERA, 1-2 record, struck out 81 batters in those 83 and a third innings pitched. He also is a very similar model, maybe not to the absolute insanity that was Tyler Rogers' release point, but he also has a 5-degree kind of side-on delivery, which we've seen obviously David Stearns in the past, obviously this past deadline, adding Tyler Rogers. The guy, he's an ARB too, so he has another year of control. This past year, he's going to be making around $2.5 million. Dick Monfort really doesn't care about adding or cutting some salary. But again, Jimmy Herget, they also have guys like Seth Halverson. They have a few interesting relief arms in that Colorado bullpen. But again, when you've got guys pitching in Colorado, the ERAs are inflated. But Jimmy Herget had a very rare good season for the Colorado Rockies coming out of their bullpen. In the same vein as Stevenson, you're just adding, again, a guy you can put in mid-level leverage that you have to build the bullpen. And again, he has 2 years of control. So even if he has a good year, he'll probably sit around $4 million in arbitration. Then you get to the 4A prospect / guy who saw big league time, and it's Zach Veen, who was a highly touted prospect drafted in the 2020 draft, 9th overall. He was a former top prospect overall in the game. Injuries have slowed down his post-draft career, dealt with a lot of injuries. He got up to the big leagues. Again, he only had 12 games, only got 34 ABs, 4 for 34, a homer, couple RBIs, but struck out 14 times. Maybe you get him into an organization that is analytical, because we've seen reports of the Rockies have like one guy in their analytics department. Graded out 60 runs, 60 arm, 55 grade. He's probably a corner. He came out as a center fielder, now probably profiles more as a left fielder. But again, great speed, great arm. The bat was the one concern, which, again, he's not going to hit for a ton of power. It's more depth. Obviously, we're big on Carson Bench. We have, Nimmo and Soto. Maybe this is a guy who was one of the top prospects overall in baseball. Maybe you get him to make a few adjustments. And we've seen in the minor leagues, he's had some good seasons. But again, injuries has kind of been that bugaboo with him, where it's like anytime he would just get going, it'd be a shoulder injury, or always, he's had a couple of hamstring injuries that have cut a lot of his development. And then you add, again, he's in the Colorado Rockies system. You get him into a more analytically driven team. Maybe, again, you get that high pedigree guy again, and he's fallen out of favor in Colorado prospect-wise. Guys like Charlie Cogden, guys like Ethan Holiday have jumped him. And Brendan Doyle's playing center field. Benny Montgomery's out there. And plus, you obviously now with a new president of baseball operations, there's no alignment and nor, again, relationship with this player. Jeff McNeil can come in and play second base, probably hit leadoff for the Colorado Rockies, and be maybe their best overall player going into the season. And if they're smart, he has a good year in Colorado, you'd flip him. But again, this is the same organization that held on to Ryan McMahon for 9 years too long, didn't trade Arenado at his prime value, and Trevor Story at his peak value. So again, don't expect them to be a very good, well-run organization. So that's why, again, you definitely make the call and say, hey, are you interested in Jeff McNeil? And our last trade partner and destination, let's call it a team that fell short in the American League Division Series to the Seattle Mariners, and that being the Detroit Tigers. Gleyber Torres is a pending UFA. Undecided as of now if he's coming back to play. They've got guys like Kevin McGonigal most likely going to play shortstop for them in their future. So again, they're looking to add more talent. They're also one of the highest team strikeout rates. So maybe they'd like a little more contact in their lineup. And just like it seems like all these trades, they got a reliever or two potentially they could flip McNeil for as well. So let's throw the proposal up. The New York Mets would acquire right-handed reliever Alex Lang, and the Detroit Tigers, the Mets would cover $9 million for Jeff McNeil. Gleyber Torres was similar, making about 10, I believe it was like $12 million last year for the Tigers. So again, eat a bunch of the money for a lesser player than Gleyber Torres and McNeil, and then you add Alex Lang to the Mets bullpen. He came up in 2023, was kind of his big breakout year. This is a guy also we've been talking about in trade target for years now. In 67 games, got a 3.68 ERA, strikeout 79 batters in 66 innings pitched. 2024 stepped back a little bit, also got sent down. I remember in 2024, 21 games played in the big leagues, a 4.3, 4 ERA, and 18 2/3 innings, striking out 21. And this year only pitched one game in the regular season, struck out one batter in 1 innings pitched. He was the closer in 2023, lost it in 2020. Tigers bringing Tommy Kahnle. They brought in Kyle Finnegan this past year, so he's moved down in the pecking order. He did pitch pretty well in the postseason for the Tigers. You're looking at a team that doesn't have a second baseman. You add McNeil to some more contact hitting, which that team has been very heavy, strikeout, high power, but maybe they want to go a little more balanced. You put a guy like McNeil at second. Even if they bring back Gleyber Torres, then you can move him around. Play him in left field if you would like. And the Tigers do like their versatility pieces as well. Andy Ibanez can play multiple positions. They have a lot of left-handed bats as well as Kerry Carpenter, Riley Green. So again, you add a third left-handed bat with Spencer Torkelson in that lineup. Now again, if he's hitting 6th or 7th in the Tiger lineup, that lengthens their lineup. And again, the Mets eating $9 million, it's a lot cheaper than what they paid Gleyber Torres, and a ownership and front office that has a major question to answer with Tarek Skubal. And maybe if they do find a way to extend it, shed a little bit of salary. Again, if you're not going to re-sign Gleyber Torres, maybe you get a cheaper option with the Mets paying down Jeff McNeil's contract. It fits a little bit better for the Tigers going forward if they decide to pay Tarek Skubal. If not, maybe there's another trade within the Mets and the Tigers where maybe it's Jeff McNeil holding for another potential shortstop prospect that the Mets have. Who knows? Who knows? Video coming soon. But this bullpen does need to be rebuilt. There's a lot of guys missing. So if McNeil's getting traded, I wouldn't be surprised if it is for relievers. So with all that being said, McNeil is a valuable piece, and he can provide value in multiple ways. But for this group, this core needs a shakeup, and especially with the improvements of young players, it is just a numbers game where Jeff has given this organization a couple of very good years, a couple of bad years. The time of the flying squirrel has come to an end.